and this faith journey has produced is peace and joy. And so, God, we enter your gates today with thanksgiving. We are thanking you that we are growing up in faith. We are thanking you that we are becoming and beholding and becoming changed for the time we have spent in your presence. Hello, good afternoon. How are you doing today, beautiful people? You know, I want to be real churchy for 30 seconds and follow that up with, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in him. I don't have a good reason for it. That's just where I'm feeling, I think it's Willie Moore Jr. He talks about, he feels it in his shanana. I felt that in my shanana. And so I am just so happy to be with you today. If you don't know me, if this is your first time, it is both my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to Midday Manna. What is Midday Manna, you ask? It is a show that God gave me now, let's call it 3 years ago, because you guys know we lost a year in quarantine. But let's say about 3 years ago, and it was literally, I was reading my Bible and going through the book of Exodus and the story of the children of Israel crossing over. And that's they crossed into the promised land in the book of Joshua. And so I was reading that, and and in Exodus, though, it talks about the journey from Egypt to the promised land and the 40 years they lost and da-da-da-da-da. But I was reading about manna, and God gave me a couple of things about manna. And one of those things about manna was that manna is provision for a season. Because think about it, manna only fell in the wilderness, but it didn't fall the whole time. It fell only for this specific amount of time. And manna had a shelf life. Like, it was only good for, literally 24 hours, 6 days a week. And then 1 day a week, it was good for 48 hours. And that tells me that, but the beauty of God is that the Bible says he changes. He does not change. He changes not. And so that means that same God who let manna fall from heaven to feed the children of Israel is the same God who is still sending manna or provision for us in our transitional seasons. And so we have midday manna, because I believe that in the middle of the day, in between morning and afternoon, because that's a transition, in between where you are and where you're going, in between what's happening and what you want to happen, in between all of those things, we can always go to God and ask him for provision. And he, being the wonderful, loving God, Father, Savior that he is, that he will surely provide. So that is Midday Manna in a nutshell. Another thing about me is that I am the founder of a wonderful, absolutely wonderful company called Legacy Builders, right? Legacy Builders, LLC. I founded that company with God there at Legacy Builders. We believe in helping not only families, but more specifically couples, gain necessary tools and skills to build a lasting legacy. And for those married couples, we also help them have a satisfying and successful relationship. Yep. So that's enough about me. If you would love to learn more about Legacy Builders or more about me, you can go to this website below, Work with Legacy Builders, where there you will find what we call a case study or a complimentary training on literally how to leave a lasting legacy in marriage. And we go through that and we give you some tools and tricks, and we just encourage everyone. Even if you're not married, I think it's a great opportunity for you to see from a picture of a person who's been doing this a while being 15 years. Yes, I know I only look 15, but I've been married for 15 years. With that said, I'm going to go ahead with today's presentation, and it's an interesting one, at least to me. If you see, and you should be, and guys, forgive me, I don't even know where on the screen that you can see where you see the topic. But today's topic is it's kind of two in one. But the first thing that occurred to me is that today is 7/7. And one of the things that I personally have with God is this affinity for numbers. So, like God and I'll read the Bible. I'm that person who, in 2020, I was having a low moment and I literally went through the Bible and I said, I'm going to start at Genesis. Let me see what 2020 looks like in the Bible. So, what book has, chapter 20, verse 20? And there are not as many as you think. I don't think Genesis had one, so I think it was Leviticus. And that verse spoke to me specifically. So today is 7/7, and I'm just like, let me see what will speak to me today. What has and I'm sorry, my chair is giving me the blues. It keeps sliding back down. But what's 7/7? Because if you do numbers, and God is a God of numbers because he's a God of order and structure. And so you follow, yes, there's, the spiritual, all this stuff about, numerology and all things, but God is the one who created these numbers. He is a God of numbers. And so he pays attention to these detailed numbers. And so 7, if you know the understanding the importance of biblical numbers, 7 is the number of perfection. Now there are 3 perfection numbers. It's 3, 7, and 10. Those are the numbers of completion and perfection. And so, 7 though is that like, whoo. And so think about it, there's 7 days in a week, 7, 7, 7, 7 is all over the place, 7, 7, 7. And so today is 7/7. I'm sorry, I have to do this because I thought about it and I said 7/7, and I don't know if my cousin is watching or if he will see it. But my cousin Shane, today is his anniversary. He got married on 7/7/7. So he has been married 13 years today. Shane, if you are watching this, if you see this, happy anniversary to you and Beatrice. All right, so back to this beautiful 7/7 for me. So today is a day chock full with opportunities to see God complete a thing, to perfect a thing, to see his hand. And so it was followed by 7/7. What do you see? Now you're like, what? Because for me, if you are taking the time to see, like, okay, today is 7/7, what can I see? I wanted to give you let's call it a perspective on what you should be looking for. Now, what's been happening over the last, couple months now is that before I would take midday manna and it would be like a specific topic in terms of like I had something that I wanted to go over and over. And that is not the case today. And it hasn't been for the last several months. For the last several months, it has come strictly from the Bible, and we would examine, a particular passage of scripture. That is what is happening again today. I told you a couple of, let's say, maybe a month ago or so, I just read through the Bible periodically, incrementally, and I am starting over reading through the Bible. And this time, instead of like doing a Bible reading plan or anything like that, I am just reading one chapter at a time, take my time with it, digest it, let's go. Yesterday's reading was from Genesis chapter 13. And I saw a couple of things in there yesterday that I think is key for us today as we are in the 7th month. And like you read the Bible and it says in the 7th year of such and such, in the 7th month on the 7th day. Well, we are in the 21st year of this new millennium. It is the 7th month on the 7th day, and it came to pass, right? And what do you see today? And so I wanted to give you a perspective for what you are seeing. So let's go. And we pick up at verse 1, where Abraham and his wife were coming back from Egypt. Abraham had tried to give the Pharaoh in Egypt the okie doke, telling them to telling Sarai, his wife, to tell the Pharaoh that she was his sister, which is true. She was his half sister, but he was fudging the truth, which is lying anyway, trying to play the okie doke. Anyway, they got kicked out, and they're going back now. And Abraham decides to go back to where God showed him was the land he was giving him. Okay, and he goes back there, and of course, this whole time, who was with him? Lot. Now, as I've told you before, I am reading from the New Messianic translation of the Bible. In that translation, one of the beautiful things why I picked it is because everything is defined. So often in the Bible, you see a name and you're like, you just take the name for granted. This particular translation does not allow you to do that anymore. You're no longer allowed to take the name for granted. Every word is literally translated. So Abraham, or in this case, Avram, because God hasn't changed his name yet. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. And that's the truth. Like here in Genesis chapter 13, God hadn't changed his name yet. And so here, though, he is the exalted father and the father of elevation. So, but what is interesting is I'm reading, and it then tells you that Lot was with him. And the first thing that jumped out to me as I am reading is that Lot meant covering. And you're like, how? Why is that a thing? Here's why that's the thing. Think about the fact that when God called Abraham in in Haran, God told him, come, I'm calling you, and I'm taking you to a place that I will show you. It was the promise, I call it, of legacy, the promise of inheritance. And in that moment, while Abraham was obedient enough to leave all he knew, to leave his family, to leave what was familiar, he took his covering with him. And so I think about that he brought Lot along, his covering with him. Because I think when he got this call to, go to this place, and God was going to show him, it didn't occur to him that God would also give him like a person to inherit. So he was literally being obedient, and I feel like hedging his bets at the same time. Yeah. And that's right where we're starting, because I feel like some of us, me included, we do this thing where we're obedient enough to take the first couple of steps, but in just like Abraham, we're trying to hedge our bets and cover ourselves along as well. So Abraham knows, and Lot was like, come with me, and he's like, yeah, come with me, because I'm gonna need a covering. I'm gonna need somebody to inherit whatever it is that God does for me. So Abraham goes, and he takes his covering with him. He goes through, he has this experience in Egypt, he comes back, and now God is really beginning to, pour out these blessings in Abraham's life. And so in the next couple verses, it talks about how rich Abraham actually was. And it says he was wealthy in silver and in gold. And in those days, in sheep and herds and in camels and in cattle, Abraham was like rich. Abraham was broke off in today's vernacular. Like Abraham had the bag. He had several bags. Okay. And it talks about him being so rich, and by association, so was Lot. So much so that their herdsmen started arguing because it was too much sheep to be in this one place, and they were fighting over like drinking holes and whatnot. And so we go through the passage, and they are arguing, and Abraham now he's had this book right here, his encounter, a first encounter with El Shaddai. He's had that first encounter with El Shaddai. And I believe that encounter with El Shaddai in the previous chapters is what allowed him to now be like, look, God has promised. And so I can let go of my covering now. And so what does Abraham do? He goes and he tells Lot, look, I'm going to let you pick. If you go north, I'm going south. If you go left, I'm going right. Either way, let's just separate so that this fighting can stop. Now, that happens. And this is where I wanted us to get to, because again, we're talking about is 7-7. What do you see? Lot goes and Lot surveys the land all around them, and he goes, and I imagine he took his time and he went, far off and this, and he knows that he needed to leave enough space so they couldn't travel. And that might mean that, if they were both in Baltimore, he's now going to go to Columbia or wherever. And Lot does what he does, and he surveys. And what Lot does is he looks, and it says here in the Bible that Lot looked for the land that was well watered. And it says he lifted up his eyes and he saw the plain of Yarden, and it was well watered everywhere. And so he went back and he took the best of what he could see for himself. Think about that. But what even more than that is the idea that in taking what was best for him, he was also not doing what was best for Abraham. Because Abraham, to be clear, Abraham was rich, and Lot got rich because he was with Abraham. And somewhere along the way, Lot decided that, since we're going to break up, I'm going to take, or we're going to go our separate ways because we have to, or whatever, because of this argument, because of this, and I'm not even going to say a toxic relationship, but because we can't get along right now, really. Or because we can no longer coexist in the same place without contention and conflict. And there are many of us are like that, who we can no longer coexist in this place because of conflict or whatever. And the choice was he picked the best, but in picking the best, he picked the best for him. And the best for him did not include, I believe, a consideration for his brother, for his uncle. And so I want to tell you that while you're looking, while you're seeing, really look at what you're picking. And if what you're picking is going to not be the best just for you, but for those connected to you, then it may not be the best after all. So that's number one. What do you like? Look and see. But when you see, make sure that what you're picking is not only the best for you, but it's the best for those who are connected to you, who are associated with you, or if you're Lot's case, who you are covering. Because that's what Lot meant. He was covering something. And so he only looked out for what he was covering for. So that's number one. As we continue, though, it says that what Lot looked at was, how well watered it was. So what was going to protect his assets? They had sheep and they had cattle and da-da-da-da-da. And so Lot was looking out for himself and his assets. And he looked, and what he saw in this area was Sodom and Gomorrah. And you're like, how? What? But again, we talk about the fact that I'm reading this new Messianic translation. And so we've heard Sodom and Gomorrah, but did you know what they mean? It literally says here that Sodom means burning. It denotes a penal constriction around the ankles. And Gomorrah means submersion, tyrants, binded or tied up sheaves, and people of fear. So that means not only when Lot was looking, did what he see, the choice that he made, it was better for him and not necessarily for those connected for him, but his choice, what looked good to the eyes, was a place that would put him in bondage. Because what looked good to his eyes, what protected his assets, was bondage. And that's what he picked. And so as we are sitting here at 7-7, and you are looking around, and if you're like me, you're looking for God to do what he has promised, to fulfill the word that he has spoken to you. What my caution to you today is, what you see, what does it represent? And just because it looks good, again, because it was well watered, it was perfect, it was going to be everything he needed, but it was bondage. Thus, just because it looks good doesn't mean it's not going to tie you up and cost you everything. Because think about it, more than the fact that in that moment, when we continue Lot's story, we know that literally being in Sodom and Gomorrah cost him everything. It cost him his daughters, it cost him his wealth, it cost him his wife, it nearly cost him his life. And it all went back to this moment where he was choosing, and what he chose to look for, what was better for him and what was better for his assets. Because I think the Bible does a really good job of putting in what needs to be put in and leaving enough that we can put ourselves in the position. And I don't even think like Lot was trying to be mean with his choice. I don't think he was trying to be mean. I don't think he thought, I'm a leave my uncle, out here. Or I don't even think he thought, like, what does it mean, or anything like that. I think he was literally doing the best he could do with the knowledge he had. But what was different was that I also don't think, though, that Lot consulted God. And that may be a wrong assumption on my part, but I think about how Abraham was the covering, and over in these passages of scripture, it talks about Abraham's continued conversation and Lot's continued compromise. And so I think while Abraham was off building this new relationship, Lot was off watching his money, watching his whatever. And so these were the things that were guiding his choices. So we talked last month over and over about your mindset. And we talked about, the month before that, about what you say. And so we're coming now, and now we're talking about what you see. Right? Because what you see matters. And what you're using as your filter or your perception matters. And those things come from what you saw. Because think about, I have a friend, and I'm not going to tell you her name. Just know that her name means black, right? And one of the beautiful things about that is we automatically think black, and we think black and dark are the same thing. And the truth is they're not. Black is literally a measure of your perception of the amount of light or lack thereof in a thing. That's why, like, you literally, you have black shirts and one looks, and we talk about your blacks don't match, because whatever is going on with the dye in that material, your perception of how much light is processing through that thing is different from shirt to shirt. That is black. Darkness or dark is literally the absence of light. So one is about what you perceive, and one actually has none of the thing in it. And so I think many of us, we are thinking, I'm fumbling around in the dark. No, there is no absence of light in your life. There is light. The problem is, how are you perceiving this light? Like, how much light are you letting into your situation? How much light are you considering when you make these choices? And so, as you see in the coming days, in the coming weeks of this month, as the coming months of this year, my encouragement is today, 7/7. What do you see? Make sure what you see, you're allowing as much light as possible in. And light comes from the light giver, which is God Himself. Because when we think about it, the last thing I will tell you about the story of Lot is that in the preceding verse, God had already told Abraham where his inheritance was. God had already so we started with the idea that God told Abraham He was going to take him to a land He will show him. God had already showed him the land. Excuse me. And so after the whole situation in Egypt, what does Abraham do? He goes back to the place where he met God. And so that's why I'm telling you that this idea that Lot was around Abraham, who was encountering God, and God was becoming more and more important and more of a filter for Abraham. And then we have Lot over here who has access to the same God, to the same light, but his perception is caught up in the number of sheep and making sure he's taking care of his assets and this and that and the third, versus going to the source of light and allowing that to inform him. And so I think I've said enough about this idea that, what you see matters, and the perception by which you see it matters. And so today, my encouragement for you as you transition from morning to afternoon, from where you are to where you're going, is to choose light. Okay? So I hope you have a wonderful, an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. As I always tell you, I hope that your latter, as in the latter half of your day, is greater than the beginning. And I just continue to wish you just abundant blessings and revelations and interactions and encounters with El Shaddai, the God who is absolutely, positively more than enough. Bye-bye. And thank you so much for joining me. Oh, and really quickly, if you have not already done so, like, share, and subscribe. If you are on YouTube, click the subscribe button. If you are on Facebook, like and share this broadcast with someone who you know who is in the valley of making a decision and who is looking at all the facts. Guys, today, again, the encouragement, the manna for today is to choose light. Bye-bye. And this faith journey has produced is peace and joy. And so, God, we enter your gates today with thanksgiving. We are thanking you that we are growing up in faith. We are thanking you that we are becoming and beholding and becoming changed for the time we have spent in your presence.